So further contributions to species extinction include overexploitation. The global illegal trade in wildlife brings an average of at least $600,000 an hour, and at least 66% of all live animals smuggled around the world will die in transit. Organized crime has moved into illegal wildlife smuggling because of huge profits involved. As listed on your screen, the illegal killing or poaching, capturing, and selling of species is threatening biodiversity. The mountain gorilla is worth $150,000 per gorilla. The pelt of a giant panda is worth $100,000, and the rhino horn is worth up to $25,000 a pound. Let's focus on the mountain gorillas a little bit. Thanks to conservation efforts, the population of mountain gorillas has actually increased from 620 individuals in 1989 to about 880 individuals today. This number is likely to be accurate as these animals have been intensely monitored since the 1950s. There's a population of mountain gorillas in Virunga, and about 480 mountain gorillas live in Virunga alone. They live in altitudes ranging from 2,300 to 4,500 meters. They actually live in Virunga National Park, the DRC, and the Volcanoes National Park in northern Rwanda in Africa, while there's a few that live in Mahinga National Park in southwestern Uganda. So we're talking about a population of mountain gorillas that live in Rwanda in some national parks. Now, there's another population called the Bwindi population of mountain gorilla, and it lives at a lower elevation of 1,500 to 2,300 meters. A 2011 census recorded about 400 individuals in this population of mountain gorillas. Additionally, there's 4 orphaned mountain gorillas that currently reside in a sanctuary in Uganda. One of the major threats to the mountain gorilla is habitat loss. In 2004, about 1,500 hectares of prime mountain gorilla habitat was cleared by illegal settlers in Virunga National Park, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Convoys of people from Rwanda and the DRC destroyed large tracts of the park, which was home to the mountain gorillas and other endangered species. They converted the land to agricultural and pasture land. So habitat loss is one of the main things that is threatening the mountain gorilla. In addition to being hunted for meat, the mountain gorillas are also illegally hunted for trophies and for live infants. As many as 15 of Virunga's mountain gorillas may have been killed since the outbreak of civil war in 1990. Between 1990 and 94, large numbers of Rwandan refugees fled to camps at the edge of the Virunga National Park. 4 habituated silverback gorillas were killed, along with some of their group members. Now, when I say habituated, it's because some of these mountain gorillas are so often studied by people, they don't see people as a threat. And not only are they studied by people, but people come to the national parks to view them and watch them. So they have no instinct that people are a threat and therefore don't run when they see people. As a result, 4 of them were killed. In 2007, in less than 2 months, 7 gorillas were killed. These gorillas were not killed and taken for trade, but rather they were shot execution style and left to rot. One of the females that was shot execution style in the back of her head had an infant still alive clinging to the dead mother. The picture here in the bottom left corner is the result of that killing of 7 gorillas. This was a brutal killing of mountain gorillas, and it drew international attention. Investigators determined that criminal gangs that were running illegal charcoal were the cause of it. The gang's goal was to uproot one of the park rangers that had cracked down on the illegal charcoal trade. The ranger pushed the charcoal trade out of the Virunga National Park, and basically the people weren't happy with it. The ranger worked with local communities to find alternative fuel and other forms of income for the people that did trade charcoal. He was actually recognized internationally for his conservation efforts. But there's a high demand for firewood needed for cooking in this region, and most of the easily accessible wood has already been taken. So the Virunga National Park is prime area for picking of firewood. This is Africa's oldest national park and home to half of the world's remaining gorillas. It's one of the few places in eastern Congo left with wood for making charcoal. A sack of charcoal can sell for $24 because of the large population of refugees and people that rely on it for subsistence living and as well as for agriculture. So basically, people that wanted to trade charcoal were pushed out of Virunga National Park, weren't allowed in to gather wood for charcoal, and their way of reciprocating or retaliating was to come into the park and shoot 7 gorillas execution style. Now let's talk about the pandas. The pelt of a giant panda, as I mentioned earlier, sells for over $100,000. In 2016, CITES, C-I-T-E-S, the Convention on International Threatened and Endangered Species, upgraded the giant panda from endangered to vulnerable. Right now, there's about 1,800 pandas that exist in the wild in China. There's been success for the giant panda that's been endangered since 1990, but that's because of a marked decrease in poaching, which was rampant back in the 1980s. There's also been a huge expansion in China to protect the habitat of these animals, with over 67 panda reserves. So that's good news that the panda has been upgraded from being endangered to vulnerable, and that the population numbers are increasing, and that we're seeing a decrease in poaching of these animals. Poached rhino horn is worth $25,000 a pound, and rhino horn has been used in China medicine for more than 2,000 years. It's used to treat fever, rheumatism, gout, and other disorders. It also is considered that the horn can also cure snake bites, stop hallucinations, cure typhoid and headaches, vomiting, and food poisoning. In February 2017, the Department of Environmental Affairs released poaching statistics for 2016, showing a 10% decline in rhino poaching as compared to the previous year. But there's really no reason to celebrate. In 2016, over 1,054 rhinos were killed in South Africa alone, and that's nearly 3 rhinos being killed every day just for the rhino horn. So again, this is a species that definitely needs to be protected from overexploitation. Other species that have been threatened with overexploitation are going to be discussed on this slide. The Indian or the Bengal tiger can actually sell for $70,000 for the tiger, and then if you sell the fur alone, that can sell for up to $100,000 in Tokyo. Many bird species are also under severe extinction threat because of the pet trade. They include thousands of birds in South America. Almost 3.3 million birds annually are exported from Southeast Asia, with 1.3 million coming from Indonesia alone. The pressure on the Indonesian birds is so severe that in just one day in a single market, over 16,000 birds of about 206 different species were reported to be for sale. 98% of these were native to Indonesia, and 20% of them occurred nowhere else in the world. So, we have about 60 bird species, mostly parrots, that are considered threatened and endangered because of the wild bird trade. Plants, too, can be considered low in population numbers and on the brink of extinction. There are some exotic plants that are endangered and are gathered for special landscaping. Collectors will pay up to $5,000 for a rare orchid and up to $15,000 for a saguaro cactus. There's a picture of a saguaro cactus in the bottom right. And this orchid itself is called the Rothschild orchid. It's commonly known as the gold of Kinabalu orchid. It was discovered in 1987, after which it was ravaged by orchid smugglers and became nearly extinct, and it sold for $5,000 a plant. Madagascar is known as one of the top 5 most biodiverse regions in the world. It consists of ecosystems that include cloud forests, lowland forests, dry deciduous forests, spiny forests, and grassy plateaus. They also have wetlands, mangroves, and reefs available as well. This picture depicts where these different forests are located throughout Madagascar, and the red dots depict different parks and reserves that have been established throughout Madagascar. Now, there's other important protected areas that are also depicted, which are some nature reserves as well. More than 80% of the country's original forest cover has actually been lost Primary forests only cover about 12% of the country's land area at this time. However, studies suggest that while forests continue to be lost, they're being lost at a slower rate than what they were previously. Coral reefs in this country have also been degraded. In 2013, the total number of species submitted to the UN for classification was 3,024 species, including 166 that are considered critically endangered, 290 endangered, 11 extinct species, and 476 vulnerable species from this country in itself. Because of this country's high rate of endemic species, the loss of 1 hectare of forest in Madagascar has a larger effect on biodiversity than forest loss anywhere else in the world. This country is trying to help people understand that they can make more money with ecotourism than changing habitat of forest to agricultural land. In fact, in the last 5 years, they made over $57 million with people coming to visit their national parks and national reserves. So this is a list of the biodiversity of Madagascar. You'll notice that out of all the different species, the most variety is within the plants, 12,000 different plant species, of which 96% are endemic and only found in Madagascar. Then as we go down the list, they have over 1,000 different orchids. 85% are endemic and only found in Madagascar. 278 amphibians, of which all of them are endemic and only found in Madagascar. 389 reptiles, of which 90% are considered endemic and only found in Madagascar. 282 birds, 159 fish, and Madagascar is known for its lemur population. They have over 104 different lemurs, of which 100% of them are endemic and not found anywhere else in the world. They do have 60 small mammals. 92% of them are endemic and not found anywhere else in the world. 43 different bats and 13 different carnivores. Now, I mentioned these numbers earlier on the previous slide, but I've listed them here. In Madagascar, there's about 166 critically endangered species, 290 endangered species, 11 extinct, and 476 species that are considered to be vulnerable. And remember, I mentioned that the loss of 1 hectare of forest in Madagascar has a larger effect on biodiversity than any forest loss elsewhere in the world. So what is being done? The Madagascar government has set up over 20 different nature reserves and national parks all over the island. The government is teaching local people better forms of land management and farming practices and trying to halt the loss of forest in Madagascar. In addition, Madagascar has joined several international treaties and has passed several laws to protect endangered species and marine life in the region. A country much similar to Madagascar is Costa Rica, a small country in Central America. Tropical rainforest once completely covered Costa Rica as a whole, but between 1963 and 1983, much of the country's forests were cleared for grazing of cattle. Costa Rica is considered a superpower of biodiversity with over 500,000 different plant species and animal species. Just as Madagascar set up different nature reserves and national parks, Costa Rica has done the same thing. They have a system of nature reserves and national parks that by 2010 included 1/4 of the total land area within Costa Rica. It now devotes a large proportion of its land to biodiversity conservation than any other country in the world. The largest source of income within this country is about $1 billion a year ecotourism industry. So they're getting a good bit of money from ecotourism coming into this country. To reduce deforestation, the Costa Rica government has eliminated subsidies that supported forest land conversion into agricultural land. The government also pays landowners to maintain and restore tree cover on their private properties. And between 2007 and 2008, the government planted almost 14 million trees. Costa Rica has gone from having one of the world's highest deforestation rates to one having the lowest deforestation rate. So it's definitely a success story that Madagascar can look to in order to better protect its biodiversity and the endemic species that are only found within Madagascar.